I got home just before midnight on Christmas Eve, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. 12 hours in the ER will do that, especially when your last patient says I'm just sleepy, but their lips are turning blue. I walked in thinking of nothing but hot tea and silence. But then I saw the boots, my daughter's boots. Right by the door, my breath caught. The couch came next, her coat was slumped on the armrest, her overnight bag unopened. And there she was, curled up tight, like someone sleeping in public, like she didn't feel safe even in her own home. She looked up the moment I whispered her name. "Hey," she said softly, blinking hard. "Why are you here?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. "They said there wasn't room," she said. Just like that, not angry, not dramatic, just tired, at the table. Her voice cracked halfway through. I sat down beside her as she shrugged the kind of shrug that's trying to swallow pain. Grandma said she wasn't expecting me, that there were too many people. My heart clenched, but I kept still. "I got there early," she added, like maybe that helped. She told me how they didn't offer a seat, how her cousin was in her usual spot, how her grandfather didn't even look up when she walked in. "They said it was a full house," she whispered, like I was the extra chair. Then she laughed a little, but her eyes filled. I followed her gaze to the kitchen, a slice of toast on a paper towel, half a banana next to it. Her Christmas dinner. No one made her a plate, no one asked if she was okay. "I wasn't hungry anyway," she said, but her hands trembled. That's the part that broke me, not the cold toast or the long drive she took home alone. Not even the silence. It was the fact that they looked her in the eyes, my sweet, brave girl, who'd wrapped up cookies and left early to be polite, and told her without yelling, without cruelty, that there was no space. They didn't mean no space on the table. They meant no space for her. She didn't belong. Not really. I sat in the dark that night while she slept in the sweater she'd chosen just for them and realized something simple but sharp. They made their choice. And for the first time in a long time, I made mine. Abby had been so excited that morning. She'd picked out her outfit the night before, a soft navy sweater with tiny silver stars stitched across the sleeves. It was her grandmother's favorite color. She curled her hair for the first time in months. Not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to look grown up. This was her first holiday driving herself. She even wrapped up a small tin of cookies she'd baked, cranberry almond shortbread, the recipe she found in one of my old cookbooks. She was proud, nervous, and ready. At least she thought she was ready. What she wasn't ready for was the look she got when she arrived. "Oh, I didn't realize you'd be coming." Her grandmother had said, her voice soft but final. Abby told me later it felt like walking into a room where the party had already started and she wasn't on the guest list. She'd arrived early just like I asked her to. But there were no extra plates, no surprise hugs, no one pulling up a chair. Just awkward glances, full seats, and a quiet suggestion that she head home before it gets dark. Abby didn't fight. She's never been one to beg for space. That's the thing about kids like Abby. They don't scream when they're hurt. They fold into themselves. They make excuses for the people who should have known better. She said Grandma looked stressed, like her presence was an added problem. She counted 28 people around that table, cousins she barely knew, someone's boyfriend, even a neighbor who came late and still got a chair. But not her. Not the girl with the cookie tin in her lap and a lump in her throat. They didn't yell at her. They didn't slam a door. They just made her feel invisible. And invisibility hurts in a special kind of way. It's not loud, it doesn't leave bruises you can show, but it chips away at your sense of worth, especially when it comes from people who should make you feel most at home. I learned that lesson early, but I had hoped foolishly maybe that Abby would be spared it. That somehow being kind and considerate would be enough to earn her place. But that's not how families like mine work. In a room full of loud personalities and generational favorites, the quiet ones get passed over. That night, sitting beside her as she tried not to cry, I realized something heartbreaking. Abby thought it was her fault, that maybe she shouldn't have come. Maybe she should have texted first or double-checked the invite. And in her young mind, she couldn't imagine that people could be that casually cruel. But I could. I'd seen it before. I just never imagined they'd turn it on her. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Because if they could do that to Abby this year, what would they do next time? I wasn't always quiet. As a kid, I asked questions, lots of them, about everything. Why our veins look blue under the skin. How birds know which direction to fly. What happens inside a heart when it breaks. My favorite book wasn't a fairy tale, it was an old anatomy guide from the thrift store. I didn't see anything strange in that. But my family did. My mom would sigh loud and long whenever I started talking about cells or science. My dad used to joke that I must have been swapped at birth. At some point, I started believing him. They didn't hit me, they didn't scream. But they rolled their eyes, changed the subject, called me dramatic when I cried. I learned early that love came with limits. You could be part of the family, sure, but only if you didn't make them uncomfortable. Only if you laughed at the right things, didn't correct anyone, and definitely didn't win any science fairs. My sister Janelle knew this instinctively. She was bright, but not too bright. She failed big and laughed it off. Everyone adored her. She called me Dr. Freak in high school. When I became an actual doctor, she upgraded it to Dr. Moneybags. They never celebrated when I got my scholarship. No hugs, no dinner out, not even a card. My mom's only comment was, "Men don't like girls who act smarter than them." And when I said maybe I'd marry myself, she just frowned. I didn't expect applause, but I guess I expected something, recognition, pride. But I was already marked as the girl who made everyone else look bad just by existing. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how to be smaller. And so they made me feel like I had to apologize for standing out. Years later, even after I'd worked my way through med school, serving tables, pulling double shifts, they never visited once. But when they needed help, I was the first number they dialed. Rent was late, someone needed surgery, credit card debt piled up, and I always helped. Quietly, without fanfare. Because I thought that's what you do when you've made it, you give back. But looking back now, I see the pattern. I wasn't the daughter, I was the resource, the reliable one, the wallet in a white coat. And as long as I stayed useful and silent, that arrangement worked just fine. But then came the first no. Just one. A gentle boundary. I said I couldn't pay for my niece's science camp. I explained I was covering the mortgage, the insurance, the medical expenses. And in return, I got accused of being selfish, jealous even. That word stunned me. Jealous of what? Of being treated like an outsider in my own family. That moment stayed with me, tucked in the back of my mind, until Christmas Eve, when they did the same thing to Abby. And suddenly the pattern was no longer just about me, it was about her too. When my parents retired early, way too early, with no savings and more pride than plans, I didn't hesitate. I bought them a house. It wasn't extravagant, just a clean 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. I told them it was a gift, and I meant it. I covered the mortgage, the utilities, even got them set up with a better health insurance plan, because their coverage didn't include my mom's blood pressure meds. They moved in like it was theirs. I let them. I wanted them to feel safe. But the truth is, I also wanted to feel like I had done enough to finally be seen. At first, I convinced myself this was love. Love gives. Love provides. But love, real love, isn't supposed to be one-directional. I handled every unexpected bill, leaky pipes, dental procedures, even their cable package when they complained about losing the sports channel. I never asked for thanks, and most of the time I didn't get any. When I brought Abby over for visits, my mom would point out how quiet she was, how she didn't really feel like family. I smiled through it. I told myself they just didn't know how to connect. But the older Abby got, the colder they became. And still, I kept showing up. When Janelle needed help with her rent, I wired it. When her car broke down, I co-signed the loan. Every time she called with a new crisis, I answered. I told myself that's what family does. You don't keep score, but that's the trick, isn't it? When you're the one holding the safety net, no one ever asks how you're doing. They just bounce, and then they blame you when the net frays. I became indispensable, but invisible, needed, but never truly included. What I didn't realize until Christmas Eve was how much I'd normalized that role. I wasn't angry at first, I was ashamed. Ashamed that I let Abby grow up watching me bend over backward for people who didn't even make room for her at a holiday table. I had taught her without meaning to that love meant swallowing mistreatment, that being strong meant staying silent. But when I saw her sleeping on the couch in that sweater, trying to make herself small, I knew I had to unlearn that lesson for both our sakes, especially hers. Because if I didn't stand up now, what would she carry into adulthood? Would she believe love always came with conditions? That being left out meant you weren't worthy? That giving and giving without getting anything back was the price of being kind? No. I refused to let that be her inheritance. It wasn't just about bills anymore. It was about dignity. About showing her that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of love. And that love, real love, makes room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen staring at Abby's overnight bag still zipped by the door. She had packed so carefully, picked the sweater Grandma once complimented, tucked the cookies in tissue paper, even included a holiday card she drew by hand. She was hoping to be seen. Not praised, not spotlighted. Just included. That's all she wanted. And somehow, with 28 people in the house, no one had space for her. That math only has one answer. It wasn't about chairs. It was about choice. And they chose to let her stand in the cold. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was intentional exclusion disguised as oversight. I'd spent years rationalizing their behavior, telling myself they didn't know better, that they were just set in their ways. But Abby's face when she said they didn't even seem surprised to see me stripped away that illusion. They weren't shocked she showed up. They were inconvenienced. She had disrupted their version of the holiday, one where she wasn't included, one where I wasn't either. I'd bought the house, but we were never really welcome in it. So I opened my laptop, pulled up the deed, and stared at my name in black and white. Melissa Grant, sole owner. Not a co-signer, not a manager. Owner. It felt so strange realizing that for all these years, I'd held the power, but never used it. I thought generosity would earn me a seat at the table. Turns out all it earned was expectation, that I'd stay quiet, that I'd stay small. But watching Abby curl up on that couch hungry and humiliated, I finally understood what I'd been avoiding. Sometimes love looks like a closed door. I wrote the letter that night, carefully, calmly, no insults, no dramatics. Just facts, 60-day notice, property transition, legal terms. I printed it, folded it, sealed it, and placed it in my work bag. It was quiet, almost sacred, like burying something that had died long ago. I didn't do it to punish them. I did it to protect us. There's a difference. You can't ask someone to heal in the same place they were wounded. And I wasn't going to let Abby believe that love meant waiting in the hallway hoping someone would make room. The next morning, my husband came home from his shift. I told him everything. He stood silent for a moment, then said, "So what do we do now?" I looked at him steady. "We do what they never did for us," I said. "We choose each other." And with that, I placed the envelope by the door, ready to deliver it. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt clear. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting, I was reclaiming. Not out of anger, but out of love. Real love doesn't say stay small. It says you matter. The morning after Christmas always feels hollow, like the world is trying to shake off its sugar haze and glitter, but everything's just a little too quiet. That's how it felt as we pulled into my parents' driveway. My husband was beside me, calm and steady, his hand resting on my knee, not to comfort but to anchor. I carried the envelope like it held truth, not vengeance. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I hoped, maybe foolishly, that the house would be empty, that I could leave the letter and walk away without confrontation, but fate had other plans. 2 extra cars sat in the driveway, Janelle's of course, and another, probably a cousin who stayed for leftovers. I paused at the bottom step. "Let's just leave it," my husband whispered. I nodded but walked up anyway, placing the envelope carefully between the door frame and storm door so it wouldn't blow away. I was turning to leave when I heard the screen door creak. My mother stepped out in her fuzzy robe, the one she wore every Christmas morning, the one she used to boast about finding at 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it right there, and read. Her face went from confusion to disbelief to something darker. She screamed Frank. Her voice cracked like brittle glass. "Frank, get out here. She's throwing us out." My dad appeared in the doorway, disheveled and angry. Janelle followed, still in pajama pants, holding a mug like this was just another cozy holiday morning. "What's going on?" she asked, but her tone was already sharp, already choosing sides. My mom turned, pointed down the driveway at me like I was some stray mutt who had just ruined her porch. "You ungrateful little." We didn't stay to hear the rest. By the time we got home, my phone was buzzing. I let it ring. Then again. And again. The 6th time I answered. My mother didn't say hello. She didn't ask about Abby. She just shrieked, "How dare you!" In the background, I heard my dad shouting, "If you do this, you're no daughter of ours." They never once asked what happened. They didn't mention Abby, not once, not even to pretend they cared. That told me everything. This wasn't about losing a home. It was about losing control. They couldn't imagine a world where I said no and meant it. A few texts came in from cousins. One said, "Not my place, but this feels extreme." Another warned, "You only get one mom." But no one asked about Abby either. No one said what did they do to her. And in their silence, I found clarity. That envelope didn't break the family. It revealed it. It showed who was willing to look away and who was willing to speak up. And as hard as it was, I realized something important sometimes. To protect the people you love most, you have to walk away from the ones who never tried. 2 mornings later, there was a knock at my door. Not the hesitant kind. The kind that says, "I'm not here to ask, I'm here to demand." I looked through the peephole and saw her, my mother, still in that same fuzzy robe, hair barely brushed, holding the eviction letter like it was a declaration of war. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. She didn't wait. "You're really doing this," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you, I let that hang in the cold air between us, quiet and heavy." Then I asked just as calmly, "What exactly is it that you've done for me?" She blinked, then straightened like she'd been slapped. "We raised you," she snapped. "We gave you everything." I nodded slowly. "You mean the house I bought for you, the bills I paid, the insurance I arranged?" Her face flickered. Just a flash of uncertainty before the defiance returned. "We're your parents," she said, like that erased everything. You don't throw out your parents over one misunderstanding, but it wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small cuts piled over years. And the last one didn't draw more blood. It made me stop bleeding altogether. That's when she did it. She held up the letter, hands shaking, and ripped it in half. There she declared, voice triumphant, "That's done. Now stop being ridiculous." As if tearing paper could undo consequence. As if this was all some tantrum I'd eventually get over. Then came the line I'll never forget. "If you want forgiveness," she said, "you'll pay for Lily's science camp and apologize for this nonsense." She smiled like she had just fixed everything. Like all I needed was to return to my role, quiet, giving, invisible. But I wasn't her investment anymore. That moment didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It was oddly peaceful. Because in her demand for forgiveness, she revealed everything. Not regret, not concern, just entitlement. She hadn't come to understand, she'd come to reclaim control. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. There's a difference between loyalty and self-erasure, between compassion and compliance. And if she couldn't see the difference, then she never really saw me at all. She turned and walked down the porch, muttering like a heroine in a tragic play. But I knew better. Tragedy wasn't the letter. It was everything that came before it. The way love was used like currency. The way silence was expected in return for bare minimum warmth. I closed the door slowly, calmly, but in my heart I knew I had just ended a chapter that never truly belonged to me. And what came next wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about rebuilding something honest from the ground up. It didn't take long for the story to shift. A few days after the letter-ripping incident, I started hearing whispers. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging, asking if I was okay, though their tone wasn't concern. It was curiosity, the kind people save for family scandals. Janelle, of course, took the stage. She opened her arms, declared herself the only one left who still had a heart. She invited my parents to stay with her for as long as they need. Her text to me dripped with self-righteousness. I can't believe you'd abandon them. Someone has to act like family. At first, I stayed quiet. Let her play the savior. I figured she'd learn. But only 2 weeks later, she was at my front door. No long text this time, no performance. Just her wild-eyed and exhausted. I can't do it, she said before I even opened the screen. They're driving me insane. She dropped onto the porch bench like someone who hadn't slept in days. Her voice was hoarse. Mom won't stop complaining about the couch. Dad says the kids are too loud. They argue over the thermostat. They refuse to share a bathroom. She broke off and shook her head. I listened, quietly, just like I always had. And when she finally looked up, waiting for me to offer a solution, I didn't. I stayed still. They need a rental, she said. Just a little help to get started. Maybe first and last month's rent. You have the means. That part stung more than I thought it would. Because even after everything, her instinct was still to ask, not for accountability, not for understanding, but for money. I took a breath and said it gently. Janelle, you watched them turn Abby away on Christmas Eve. You stood there. That was your choice. This is mine. She blinked. It was the kind of silence that carries truth, uncomfortable, undeniable. Then she stood and left without another word. A week later, I heard she'd asked them to leave. The house was too small, she said. But I think what really shrank was her patience. They moved into a rental across town. 2 rooms, 1 broken heater, neighbors who argued louder than they did. It wasn't cruel. It was just real. The first time in years they had to live with the consequences of their choices. No one rushed to save them, not this time. What surprised me most wasn't their struggle. It was how quietly the rest of the family faded away. The cousins who once said you only get one mom stopped texting. The uncles who used to call for advice went silent. Maybe they'd seen the bills I forwarded. Maybe they just got tired of the drama. But for the first time in a long time, the weight wasn't on me. And the quiet felt like peace, not punishment. The day they left the house for good, I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. The buyer's agent handled everything, signed papers, changed locks, confirmed vacancy. I didn't go out of avoidance. I stayed away because there was nothing more to say. I had already said it, with boundaries, with silence, with one simple letter that spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Sometimes presence is mistaken for permission, and my absence that day was the clearest message I'd ever sent. They were free now, so was I, and for the first time I didn't feel the urge to look back. Abby was in the kitchen that afternoon, barefoot hair tied up, scribbling notes for her college applications. She looked up when I walked in, gave me a small smile, and poured me a cup of tea without saying a word. That's what peace feels like. Unspoken, understanding, quiet space, filled with warmth instead of walking on eggshells. I sat across from her, just watching her be. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't shrink herself. She belonged. That's all I ever wanted for her. Not perfection, not prestige, just a space where she didn't have to earn love by tiptoeing around it. She asked once if I regretted it. Selling the house, the fallout, the silence. I thought about it honestly. I thought about the years I spent trying to prove I was good enough. The money I gave, the time I sacrificed, the holidays I worked so others could rest. And then I thought about her, sitting in front of me, safe, whole, growing into someone who knew her own worth. Not even a little, I said. Because letting go didn't mean losing something, it meant returning to what mattered most. And I hadn't lost family. I'd finally chosen it. The truth is, we carry so much from the places we come from: expectations, guilt, old narratives. And for a long time, I believed that healing meant fixing things. That if I just tried harder, explained better, forgave faster, it would all be okay. But healing isn't always a reunion. Sometimes it's a release. It's allowing yourself to unclench the fists you didn't realize were balled for years. It's saying, this ends with me, and meaning it. Not out of anger, but out of love for yourself and for those who come after you. That fall, Abby got her acceptance letter. Full scholarship. She chose a program that lights her up, environmental engineering, with a minor in design. She told me once, "I want to build things people actually want to live in." I smiled. Because she's already doing that, starting with herself. We didn't throw a huge party. Just a small dinner. Her favorite pasta, candles. Laughter that didn't feel strained. It was simple but full. And that's how I knew we had made room. Looking back, the signs were always there. The quiet exclusions, the unspoken rules, the way love in my family came with fine print. I spent years shrinking myself, giving without question, believing that loyalty meant silence. But everything changed the night Abby came home from Christmas dinner with a cold slice of toast and half a banana. That wasn't just a bad night. It was the moment the illusion cracked, and I finally saw it clearly. They didn't forget her. They chose to exclude her. And that choice taught me the most important lesson of all: love doesn't look away. I didn't write that letter out of revenge. I wrote it out of clarity. Because protecting my daughter meant unlearning the belief that peace is purchased by staying quiet. Because making space for kindness sometimes requires closing the door on harm. In walking away, I didn't destroy a family, I revealed one. And in that quiet truth, I gave Abby something far more powerful than tradition. I gave her the freedom to grow without apology. The freedom to be herself in full volume. And I gave myself permission to begin again on my own terms. Today we live differently. Our holidays are smaller but warmer. Our dinners are simpler but filled with genuine laughter. Abby is thriving, surrounded by people who choose her not out of obligation, but out of real affection. I no longer check my phone waiting for their messages. I no longer explain myself to those who never really listened. That freedom is priceless. Letting go wasn't easy. But holding on to people who only love the version of you that keeps them comfortable, that's harder and far lonelier. I didn't walk away to end something. I walked away to begin something better. So if you've ever felt like you were too much or not enough or only valued when you were useful, let this story remind you you're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to stop explaining. You're allowed to make space for people who actually make space for you. And if you're building that space now, brick by careful brick, you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from the table that never set a seat for us and build one where everyone is welcome, starting with ourselves. If this story touched something in you, if you saw even a small reflection of your own journey, don't leave without sharing your thoughts. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you want more stories about family healing and the quiet strength it takes to start over, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell. There's always room at our table for honesty, for growth, and for you.